All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. Have you ever felt like your team is basically sprinting on a treadmill? Like you're working incredibly hard, but somehow pulling in a dozen completely different directions at once, launching features that just do not move the needle? Well, you're absolutely not alone. Today we're unpacking this really cool concept, the single-page strategy canvas. We're going to look at how stripping away all that usual corporate fluff and replacing it with a lean, single-page framework gets right down to what actually drives success and alignment. Imagine totally eliminating that end-of-quarter confusion just by changing how you document your main goals.
Now, let's look at the stark contrast in how we usually handle strategy. On one side, you've got the classic corporate staple, right? The dreaded 40-slide presentation deck. I mean, we've all sat through those agonizing hour-long meetings where someone just drones on, reading off these dense bullet points. But here's the hard truth, straight from our source material. A 40-slide deck isn't a strategy at all. It's an archive. It's just a massive data dump that guides exactly 0 decisions when your team is actually in the trenches doing the daily work. On the flip side, we have the one-page strategy. It's lean, it's focused, and it's actually built for action, instead of just being shoved into some digital filing cabinet.
And it really all boils down to this harsh reality. Most product strategies fail not because they're wrong, but because literally nobody can remember them. Take a second to let that sink in. It honestly doesn't matter how brilliant your market analysis is, or how gorgeous your McKinsey-style charts look. If your strategy is trapped on slide 28 of a PDF that nobody has even opened since January, well, you don't actually have a strategy. You just have an expensive wish list. If your team can't confidently recite the 1 or 2 core things you're betting the business on over a quick coffee break, the strategy just isn't working.
So let's move right into section 1, the one-page solution.
Let's explore why shrinking everything down to a single page turns your strategy into a living document that people actually reference. This isn't just some fun graphic design exercise, right? It's a fundamental shift in how your whole team operates and communicates day to day. A real effective strategy fits on one page because, at its core, it only needs 3 things to function. You need a diagnosis of the situation you're facing, a guiding policy on how you plan to deal with it, and a coherent set of actions to actually execute that policy. That's it. Everything else you're stuffing into those massive decks, the vanity metrics, the corporate buzzwords, the 50 appendices, it's literally just decoration. Stripping all that away forces absolute clarity.
Which brings us to section 2, the 5 core boxes. To brilliantly map out those core elements we just talked about, we use a canvas with exactly 5 boxes. We've got diagnosis, customer and problem, the bet, where not to play, and finally, leading indicators. No more, no less. By keeping your strategy constrained to just these 5 specific boxes, you're creating a highly dynamic tool. It lets you instantly reference your game plan during daily stand-ups, or, in that crucial moment when someone inevitably pops up and asks, "Hey, should we build this cool new feature?" You don't need to schedule a whole meeting to find the answer. So let's walk through these step by step so you can start building your own.
First step, the diagnosis. Look, before we can even decide where we're going, we have to ground ourselves in reality by defining exactly what is happening in the market and in your business right now. And this cannot be sugar-coated. It requires a super honest, clear-eyed assessment of the competitive landscape and where you actually stand within it. For example, maybe you need to frankly acknowledge that a new startup competitor just made your flagship feature look completely obsolete. Or maybe you have to admit that your customer acquisition cost has literally doubled in the last 6 months. It's a firm and, sometimes uncomfortable foundation, but every other box is going to be built right on top of it.
Next up, you clarify the customer and the problem. You really have to know precisely who you're serving and, more importantly, what fundamental problem you are solving for them. Like, what is the specific job they are hiring your product or service to do? Are you saving them 3 hours of agonizing manual data entry every week, or are you just making them look good to their boss in a Friday presentation? You absolutely need to know. If the info in this box is vague, or if you're trying to be everything to everyone, your entire product direction is going to be a blurry mess. Imagine your team spending 3 months building a complex dashboard that nobody even asked for, just because they didn't know who the core customer actually was. We definitely want to avoid that.
Then comes the absolutely critical part, the bet. I genuinely love this framing because it really forces you to articulate the non-obvious advantage you're pursuing. Notice that word, non-obvious. If your big bet is simply, well, we're going to build a good product that's easy to use, I mean, come on, that's not a bet. Literally everyone is trying to do that. A real bet is planting your flag on 1 or 2 specific, unique beliefs about the market that, if they turn out to be true, give you a massive competitive advantage. It's stepping up and saying, we believe users will totally trade feature richness for extreme speed. Now that is a bet. It's the absolute engine of your strategy. Okay, so we also have to define our leading indicators. Because how are you actually going to know if your bet is paying off? Honestly, if you're waiting for revenue or quarterly profit to tell you if you're winning, you are waiting way too long. You need early proof. These are the metrics that move first. They give you the data and the confidence to either double down or pivot long before those lagging financial indicators ever register a blip. Think about looking for early spikes in daily active users, or maybe an increase in session length. Don't just sit around waiting for end-of-year revenue numbers to tell you the ship is already sinking, right?
All right, moving on to section 3. Strategy is subtraction.
Now, you probably noticed I conveniently skipped the fourth box on that list a minute ago. That was totally deliberate, because it brings us to the philosophical core of this entire framework. Strategy is mostly subtraction. Honestly, the absolute hardest box to fill out on this canvas is where you will not play. Human nature, and absolutely corporate nature, is to want to do everything, right? We want to chase every shiny new customer segment, add every cool feature we see trending on social media, and just please absolutely everyone. But true strategy requires you to say no, and to say it loudly. It literally means actively turning down objectively good ideas simply because they do not serve your primary bet.
Think about it. If you try to win everywhere, you commit to nothing. You end up diluting your resources, you confuse your customers, and you will absolutely burn out your engineering and marketing teams. But by writing deliberate trade-offs right into the canvas, by documenting exactly which segments, which features, and which markets you are explicitly saying no to, you force your stakeholders to argue about it once. You get it all out in the open, you make the hard call, and then you write it down permanently. This is a total game changer because it prevents you from relitigating the exact same exhausting debates during every single roadmap review.
And that brings us to our final section, putting it to work.
Okay, so your canvas is filled out, it's concise, it makes the tough choices, and best of all, the whole shebang fits entirely on one page. But how do you actually stop it from becoming just another forgotten PDF floating around the company intranet? Well, step 1, you have to trace every single initiative directly back to your bet. When someone proposes a new project, you ask them, how does this support our specific bet? If an initiative can't trace a clear line back to it, then it's misaligned. Or, honestly, it's a massive red flag that your strategy quietly shifted behind your back without anyone noticing. Step 2 is pulling this canvas out at the very start of your quarterly planning and literally reading it out loud to the team.
I know it sounds simple, but reading it aloud works beautifully because having it on just one page makes that conversation genuinely possible. The absolute magic here is all about cognitive load. Because the document is so wonderfully brief, everyone in the room can actually hold the entire strategy in their head at the exact same time. It's such an incredible revelation when it happens. People aren't sitting there trying to remember what was on slide 14 while you're busy presenting slide 32. It keeps the entire team completely unified and laser-focused on the exact same goals and, crucially, the exact same trade-offs.
So let me leave you with this final kind of provocative thought to mull over. Think about your current team right now. If I walked into your office today and pulled aside a random team member and asked them what your strategy is, could they recite it? Do they actually know the bet? Do they know what you are specifically choosing not to do? If the answer is no, well, ask yourself, is your current strategy a memorable bet that's driving real decisions? Or is it just a 40-page graveyard collecting digital dust?